Next up, Martin Alfke is going to talk about some of the tips and tricks and what you need to do in order to upgrade to Puppet 4.
Thank you, Dawn. Okay, welcome everybody to Puppet Camp in Düsseldorf. To be honest, when I sent in the call for paper, I was thinking about, hey, let's talk about the people with what is new in Puppet 4. Can they have their code working still with Puppet 4? And I slightly modified it. I'm not taking a full scope only on Puppet 4, but also on earlier versions. So when you want to upgrade from version 2 to 3, for example. Some words about me. I'm living in Berlin as a freelancer and trainer doing the PuppetLabs trainings. I'm a fan of not working, because when I start working, it means that my customers are in big trouble. I try to prevent working. That is the reason I like automation, and that is the reason why I like Puppet. And I'm one of the guys that is doing the Puppet User Group Berlin stuff. I like polls. Maybe I should start with another question. It's still everything to do with Puppet versions. Who is still using a Puppet version prior version 2? So still a version 0 dot anything. Wow. Wow, lots of work for you to do. Okay, so who's using Puppet version 2? Only a couple? Cool, awesome. Who's using Puppet version 3? Most of the crowd. Nice. Who's using Puppet version 3 with the future parser enabled? But you said you have version 0. You have all of them. Okay, okay. I understand. So maybe most of the stuff is not quite new to you because you already had the troubles either upgrading or you were lucky by coming late enough for directly starting with Puppet version 3. So what I'm going to do is a little agenda. Why do you think even consider upgrading Puppet? It's working. Why should I upgrade it? When you upgrade it, how can I make sure that my code is still working? How can I test Puppet upgrades prior I put them into production? And then a small, only a couple of slides, 2 slides, about what is new in Puppet version 4. So the first thing, why should you bother? Why should you take care? So Puppet changes very, very fast. They have almost quarterly releases, at least minor version releases. They try to get a release out, I suppose, once a year. They have an attitude that they listen to their community when it comes to best practices, and they adopt to better practices and change their own best practices websites. They change sometimes functionality. Say, oh, this is something which we learned is not good. Let's do first a deprecation warning, and in the next version, we will kill that bitch. We're removing deprecated stuff, and Puppet 4 is coming. On PuppetConf, I talked to some of the PuppetLabs guys working on Puppet 4. I asked them, okay, I thought you would already have a release candidate maybe out during PuppetConf. And he was, yeah, we tried it, but too many problems. But he said, we're trying to make a Christmas present to our Puppet users by hopefully having a release candidate out on Christmas. So why should you upgrade Puppet? Well, the first thing is security updates. It's like Heartbeat, the new one, what is it called? Yeah, that one. You need fixes on your platform. Maybe you learn when you listen to other users, read the mailing lists, participate in the IRC chat, that there is some new functionality which you have never heard of. Automated data binding to HIRAS. Using environment paths. Everybody said, hey, that's cool. Using that with R10K is really great. Maybe you heard people talking about the future parser, and you wonder, what is this? I try to enable it, it's not working. Yeah, which version are you running? 2.6? No, it's not working on that version. You have to upgrade. So when you upgrade, the first thing is the Puppet upgrade itself. This is mostly without problems, because Puppet tries to give you a proper upgrade path. The problem lies on your code. Your Puppet DSL code. You have to check whether your code is still functional, still working on your platform. So it's not good when you see Puppet code around, say, okay, we have this system in place for 3 years. The guy who did all the Puppet stuff left 2 years ago. Yeah, it's running. Nobody ever touches that system. Not really a good approach when dealing with Puppet code. Your Puppet code was written some time ago. Nowadays, best practices have changed. So you want to implement what is new best practices. And I hope you check your Puppet logs for deprecation warnings. Everybody does that. Yeah, I hope. Okay, most of you do that. Okay, maybe a few do that. Okay. So, what is that you have to take care about when it comes to your Puppet code, your DSL Puppet code? There's lots of bad and better practice nowadays. A couple of months ago, I did a review for a customer saying, oh, we have to upgrade to Puppet 3.4. Normally, we would not like to do that, but a customer is asking for the newest Ubuntu version, and the newest Ubuntu version brings Puppet 3.4, so we have to upgrade our Puppet master. And we tried it, and it's not working. Can you have a look on our Puppet code, because it's a grown code base? And I saw some really, really interesting stuff. Never thought that someone could do that with Puppet, but yeah, there are people around doing that. There are things like Puppet developers, not the PuppetLabs developers, you guys who do the Puppet DSL code, you build whole families of inheritance. The great-great-grandfather, the grandfather, the father and the son. And you have to identify, okay, where is the error happening and why is it happening? The other thing is, there's lots of installations around who still use an old, deprecated, considered harmful import. There are sites which I learned, oh, we've pulled it from GitHub. We pulled that module from GitHub. Okay, so we can upgrade it. No, we cannot. Why? Because we did local modifications to this remote module. Why did you do that? Yeah, we needed some special functionality inside. Couldn't you have built a wrapper module around? Yes, of course, but it was faster just changing the code there. And the biggest thing that causes most of the troubles is non-scoped variables, accessing variables without a proper scope. So the first thing is, please stop doing multiple levels of inheritance. It's okay to have a father and a son, that's cool, but don't build a whole big family. Maybe even stop doing inheritance almost at all. There's only one thing that is left, which is good best practice. Because in most cases, you don't need the inheritance. You can do imports instead of inheriting. It's the best practice nowadays. Stop doing inheritance. There's one best thing to do where they say, okay, I have a parameterized class. The class has parameters. The defaults for the parameters are maybe operating system specific. And these data are put into a params pp. And into the params pp, I'm deciding, okay, what is the package name depending on the operating system the agent is running on. But sometimes you want to have the possibility, so the upstream author gives you the freedom to say, hey, you can overwrite it when you use it by yourself. So but now you have the problem when you have the parameterized class with the parameters getting filled with defaults from another subclass. You have to make the class available already, bless you, already when you initialize the class at that point where you have the parameters. And that is only possible by doing inheritance from the params pp pattern. So this is best practice nowadays regarding inheritance. Everything else is meant to be, please don't do it anymore. You can still do it. We will not break it. Puppet will not break. Stop doing inheritance at all. But they ask you to kindly, please, only inherit from params. The other thing is importing. I saw really weird stuff. People were using modules, and inside their modules, inside their manifests, somehow they are importing a specific file. But modules are meant to be automatically loaded into the Puppet master. So why would you need to import? Yeah, because the class inside that file, it has another name, and Puppet will not get it. Yeah, build the module properly so that you use proper class names and you will have the autoloading available. So don't do stuff like this. You have the class foo importing bar.pp, which is a specific file in the same directory where you have the manifest init.pp from the foo class. So you have inside bar.pp, you have the class foo bus. What if someone thinks, oh, foo bus is missing, I just added. So which of the two classes are now taken into place when you want foo bus on a system to be available? You don't know it. Is this the imported one or is it the auto-loaded one? So please, don't do imports, use includes. You can include everything. This is also when people tell me, oh, but we have to continue using import because we have the site PP. And in the site PP, we're doing an import on anything that is within any direct subdirectory because inside there we have our node classification. No, you don't have to do it that way. You can make use of the environment path variable in the Puppet configuration file. This variable will take care that it reads a manifest directory and it reads all the files inside automatically. No need for doing import anymore. And please stop modifying remote modules in your local repository. It would be the same like you're downloading Apache Tarball and you patch it by yourself and you build it and you install it on the system. Now it's your responsibility to also get security updates inside, get new features inside, updating to newer versions. The best thing is to co-work, do pull requests. Most of the stuff is as an open source project available on GitHub anyway. Just fork it and do a pull request. Ask the maintainer, hey, please have a look. We have did some improvements to your module because we like it, we use it, and we use it in a slightly different way. And we also want you to, we want to share our knowledge regarding your module. The big severe trouble, variables without scopes. You're having a class foo, you're defining a variable. In somehow or another class, you're accessing that variable without giving does this variable come from. It's a pity that Puppet uses the name variable at all, because normally they are constants. You cannot overwrite a variable in the same scope. In one class, you cannot have a variable first have one value and then another value. So if you continue using variables, and you definitely want to do that, please consider using scoped variable names only, as long as they are non-local variables. This also is for templates. I see many templates around where you have something, a string, key equals, then you have the ERB opening tag, you have the equal sign, and then you have the variable name which comes from Puppet. This is an unscoped variable. And since most of you are running on Puppet 3 already, and even those who are running still on Puppet version 2, so hopefully it's 2.7, in 2.7 PuppetLabs has introduced a deprecation warning regarding dynamic scope variable lookup in templates. They've learned it the hard way that this might lead to issues. You don't know where the variable does come from. They cannot make sure that you have that variable unique in your whole Puppet DSL only. So please, scope the variable. The easiest thing to do is just put an at in front of it. Use the scope lookup bar function when you're on Puppet 2. Use the scope function when you're on Puppet 3 to be sure to also access out-of-scope variables. The same is for factor variables. I've seen installations with manifests where they use $operating system. Maybe they even thought about, okay, we've saw it someplace to have curly braces around the operating system variable to make Puppet sure where does the variable name start and where does the variable name end. But they were missing an important thing. They were missing the scope, the factor top scope, to make sure this is a variable that gets accessed from top scope. One of my customers cannot update a few of his templates especially for factor variables, because they are overwriting them in a node classification. It's absolutely insane. And people are always happy when they hear, we have now cool stuff. We have the modules, and the modules is like code, and we just take care on the code. And we offer the developers of putting in data into these code by giving them access to another repository where we have the Hira data inside. And the people, the Puppet code, Puppet DSL developers, now they don't think about how bad can people deal with data. So they don't do data validation at all. So when you've written a module and you expect something to be a string, please check that this is a string. So you will learn, okay, but Puppet doesn't have any kind of types inside. No, not yet. So how could I somehow validate or check whether something is a string, a bool? There's the standard library. Who is not using the standard library? Awesome. Everybody is using standard library. This is really nice. Standard library offers you lots of functions and lots of validate functions. There are also return functions like the is_bool. They return you true or false, so they check whether something, a string, a variable is a bool or not. So please start using these functions and make sure that Puppet does not do something wrong to your system just because you have the wrong data type inside your Hira data. When it comes to upgrading your Puppet DSL, maybe you also want to upgrade remote modules. Please check the remote modules, whether they are also working, whether they, maybe the newest module on the module forge need a newer Puppet version than the one that you can install at the moment. Somehow you're still blocked by some, well, we need to fix some code, then we can upgrade to Puppet 3.6, and you're just upgrading somehow a remote module, and this remote module somehow says, oh, but we're requiring Puppet 3.7. So take care on that when upgrading remote modules. So how do you check remote modules? Which dependencies do they have? There are two files inside a remote module. There's the Puppet file, it's the old style. Sorry. The old style, it was in the Puppet file, the author of the module, of the shared remote module, tells you, okay, this module has the following dependencies and the following requirements. Nowadays, this has been put into the metadata JSON file. And please test stuff prior upgrading your whole live platform and breaking your platform. Okay, but how do you test your Puppet DSL code? So the most easy thing you can do, syntax, well, it's more semantic checking by using Puppet parser validate. This is available right away from Puppet, no special installation needed. But it just does a semantic check. It checks whether you have forgotten somehow a closing curly brace, whether you have forgotten a trailing colon, whether you have the title spelled properly, whether you have somehow a real bad typo, but not within the naming, but within the semantic. The next check, there are extensions around, like Puppet syntax. Puppet syntax does a little bit more. It does a Puppet parser validate on manifests, and it does ERB template checking automatically. And it checks Hira data, that you have proper YAML inside your Hira data. Then you have Puppet lint available, which will also do the checks regarding what are the best practices, what should manifests look like. Puppet lint will show you a warning when you don't have the equal sign within a type declaration aligned properly. It will throw a warning when you have doing inheritance from another class. I suppose even throwing an error on that one. So this is the first thing, just checking whether semantic and syntax is correct. So the next thing we're coming to is unit testing. So who's a developer here? And who's doing Puppet code? Who's writing Puppet code? And now I see a mismatch. There are people around here writing Puppet code who say they're not a developer. So now when you write Puppet code, you have to start thinking, acting like a developer. You're developing a library which other users, the user you put your data into Hira, want to make use of. So, like Luke mentioned in the morning, there's this DevOps thing which supports companies. But DevOps also means responsibility, and it means learning new things. And for dev guys, it means have an understanding what are the troubles that an ops guys have. And for the ops people, it means have an understanding on the tool chain that a developer uses. So you might already have version control system in place. a standard which every developer does. But most developers, they sometimes work on test-driven development, and they want to test their code prior they put it in somewhere, prior they put it even on a development system. Within Puppet, you can do the same with RSpec Puppet. RSpec Puppet internally takes your manifest, your module, generates a catalog, and then looks in the catalog and compares your test with what is inside the catalog. And the next level of testing would be integration testing. Spinning up a Vagrant virtual box machine or Beaker, running server spec inside, checking that an application is running, that something is listening on a certain port, that the user is available, that a package is installed. So the most simple RSpec upgrade check you can do is first adding RSpec Test to your modules. Now maybe you want to check with different Ruby versions. In this case, either use RVM or RBenv. They don't mess with your system Ruby installation. They put it into your home directory, the stuff. You can use special files. I will not show them. This would be far too much for this audience here, and we don't have the time for that. I suppose everybody wants to have dinner, lunch quite soon. So you have the possibility of even providing, by an environment variable, different Puppet versions. You want to run checks against your module code. And then you can run your RSpec test locally, and you can verify the results, whether everything is the way you have expected it to be. When you have done that step, the next step is doing everything in an automatic way. Spinning up and somehow continuous integration service, Jenkins, Go, TeamCity, whatever you like, open source or commercial software. Add the build steps to it, maybe add some commit hooks to your Git repository so that you have, upon a push on your Git repository, immediately starting a check from your CI servers. And they run the RSpec test automatically for you, nothing to do from your side. But there's also a simple Puppet upgrade test which you can do. Just go on your Puppet master. It doesn't have to be the Puppet master, but it would be good having the Puppet master because all the certificate authority and SSL stuff. Get a tarball from PuppetLabs with a newer version you would like to have. Untar that. Run a Puppet master from the command line. Take care, this is only the web service, so it can't handle that much load, but it's good for testing. Run it on another port. Of course, that port has to be open on your Puppet master. And from any of the nodes where you would like to have a check against with, just do a Puppet run against this other port. So, for example, okay, we are still on 3.0.2, let's upgrade to 3.7. Don't know whether this big gap might be a good approach. Normally, Puppet says, okay, we definitely allow you to upgrade from one version to the other. So from 3.0 to 3.1, from 3.1 to 3.2. So if you have a longer gap, you might need more steps. But for a rough check whether things are still working, that would be fine. The thing that you have to upgrade version by version is due to the fact that you also have to upgrade your agents after you have upgraded the master. They should have the same version, but the master may be one version ahead. And for that, I have prepared a little demo. Just for a short look on it, this is an RSpec, a very minimalistic RSpec test suite. It just said, okay, I'm faking some facts like operating system should be Debian when compiling the catalog. I said it should compile a catalog. This is the absolute minimalistic thing. And then it should contain a class, should contain some subclasses, and should contain a package, for example. So this is a short, as one can see, a Debian virtual machine. It's Debian stable 7.02, version 7, with Puppet installed from the standard repository from Debian. So meaning this is Puppet version 2.7. And now you want to have a short upgrade test like I've described it. And I've prepared I don't like working, so I only type once and then use stuff mostly. I did a short script. Is this still readable also from the... Let's do it this way. So, a very short script just accepts an argument. I'm not doing data validation. Yes, I know. And it just spins up Ruby with another include path to use another path available for Ruby. And then I'm changing into a directory first. Then I'm starting the bin Puppet master process, telling him not to demonize, telling him to use another master port, and telling him to run in debug mode. And I have some versions available. 3.0, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.6. So let's check with 3.6.2. Takes a couple of seconds, saying starting Puppet master version 3.6.2. I'm having a second shell here. And I'm having a script for running a second agent by just saying, okay, Puppet agent, I want to test only, don't demonize, and I want to use the master port, the new master port. And I see somehow an error is occurring. Okay, my module is wrong anyway. Is this so? Let's check with the standard installation of Puppet. And with the standard installation, using Puppet version 2.7, everything is working. So now we have a module which is not working with Puppet 3.7. You have to start working on that module. We would have seen that it's not working on that version if we, it's not, sorry, it's, where is it? There should be a deprecation warning inside saying, hey, you're using a non-scoped variable in a template. So Puppet 2.7 still does the deprecation warning. Puppet 3.6 doesn't do the deprecation warning anymore. It just throws an error. Cannot find the variable. What is it that you're talking to me about? And just to show you, there is definitely there is an ERB template which just has an opening tag and just the variable name without scope.
Just a short question. Where is the Puppet master you're running test node getting the configuration from? Is it Puppet?
The Puppet master is running on the same system below last line. This is the local Puppet master, the standard Puppet master. It's a WebRig server, standard installation, just doing apt-get install Puppet master, spinning up a Puppet master using the WebRig web servers.
Okay. And it's using the configuration from etc Puppet?
It's using the configuration from etc Puppet, yes. No, it's not that I have somehow hidden a working module, no. So, now we have fixed everything, working on Puppet 3. Now a few more words regarding Puppet version 4. Puppet version 4 will be the next big major upgrade. They remove more deprecated functionality. They have new language features inside, which I'm very, very eager to see because they make things, especially data validation, so far more easy. So the first thing, what is going to be deprecated in Puppet 4? What will make your Puppet DSL, your node classification stuff, stop, continue working? The first thing, who's using node inheritance? Having something like a node base node, declare the base node, and then have the real node inheriting from the base node. 2, 3 people around? Okay, yeah, you would have to change your node classification prior using Puppet 4. Node inheritance will no longer work. Why? The best practices have changed. Nowadays, everybody says, hey, use roles and profiles instead, and use the manifest directory configuration directive. The next thing that will stop continue working, I know installations where they use variables with uppercase names. This will not work anymore. I know installations that use underscore in the first place of the variable. This will not work anymore. I've seen references of classes, so you have the big C for the class, and inside the braces they have the class name written with capital letters, with uppercase letters. This will not work anymore. When you have hyphens or periods in names, Puppet will no longer see these modules and recognize these modules being available. In case that someone tried because he said, yes, I can, and I'm a Ruby developer, and I don't like this Puppet abstraction layer at all, and I want to talk to the Puppet API via Ruby directly, so I'm writing manifests in Ruby. This will no longer work on Puppet version 4. You have to use the abstraction layer. So, yeah, lots of things that will no longer work on Puppet 4. But there are new things that will come with Puppet 4. Originally, they want to have the strict variable naming and lookup already available, mandatory in Puppet 4, but they said, okay, no, we need to give our users a little bit more time to adopt to these changes. So we will deprecate that stuff, and we will make it mandatory in Puppet 5. Another thing they're bringing with Puppet version 4 is a fully typed system. So Ruby itself, it's only strings. And within Puppet, you also had variables. Some were bool, some were string, some were array, some were hash. And now Puppet brings a full type system. You can say it's an integer, it's a float. It's a float with it's an integer with a certain range from -10 to +10. It's a string. It's a string starting, having at least 5 letters. It's an array with at least 2 elements. It's a hash with a certain pattern that matches. So you have a full set of types available in Puppet version 4. These types is something you can use when you have parameterized classes. You write in front of the variable what kind of type should it be, and you can skip all the data validation. Puppet 4 will do that automatically for you. So if Puppet 4 gets wrong data and you have a typed parameterized class, so you're expecting a string and you're getting an integer, the Puppet compiler will throw an error. No, the user told me it has to be a string. It's an integer that does not match. Take care when you compare variables. So when you check variables, so if $variable, and you have an empty string in the variable. In Puppet 3, this defaults to false. In Puppet 4, they changed this, saying an empty string is not false. It's an empty string, so it's true. They've added the environment path syntax. They're adding a new way of coding functions. They have lots of other new stuff inside Puppet, like iterating over arrays and stuff like that. So now you have the possibility of writing functions in Puppet DSL code. So like the standard, what you do with package file service, for example, is something you can also now write a function in that code. And for the real functions, they're offering a new function API, which will be smarter to handle for people who do Ruby development. So the question in the beginning, can you upgrade to Puppet 4? Yes, you can. Maybe you have to do some work on your Puppet DSL code. Thank you. So we have 10 minutes left for questions.
Hi, I will come back to the inherit thing you mentioned at the beginning. Basically, we've got some old node inheritment. That's why I pointed my finger up if you asked. But we're migrating to a full-fledged role and profile module. But we're using inheritance there too. Is it still a no-go, or is it okay?
It's not recommended, but it's still working. So. The inheritance of roles and profiles. Roles and profiles, who does not know what roles and profiles are? Okay, roles and profiles are just another word for modules. Within profiles, you combine some modules, shared modules, own written modules, and you do the data lookup. And what you try to achieve is, within the modules, you're on a very, very technical level. And the node is something that has a business case, a use case for the business. And with these role profiles on top of the technical modules and the roles on top of the profiles, you try to move from the technical stuff and abstract more things to have the business view. So it's just another term for modules. It's still something that's inside your module path. It still gets automatically loaded. So within classes, like roles and profiles, you can still continue doing inheritance. Yes, it's only no longer working on node basis.
Any other questions?
Just a quick question. When Puppet 5 is going to be released?
The question is when Puppet 5 will be ready. I know another community project, when they get that questions, they always say it's ready when it's ready. It's ready when it's done, yeah. You will see it on the website when we release it. Let them first please finish Puppet 4 prior they start with Puppet 5. I'm eagerly looking forward on seeing maybe on one of the minor upgrades for Puppet 4 to also have something new coming into place, especially for people who develop shared modules. This is a very, very interesting stuff. They want to introduce an access control list on classes and variables. So within your modules, you can say, within your module, you can say, okay, a specific class is set to private. So it may not be used from outside of that module. It can only be used internally. It's mostly meant for when you develop a module and you want to deliver a stable API to people using that module. And you don't want these people to use somehow the module not via the provided API, because this will allow you to do changes internally without breaking the way how you access your module. So this is something I talked to Henrik Lindbergh on PuppetConf, and I asked him, what about this ACL stuff? Will it be in Puppet 4? And he said, no, definitely not in Puppet 4.0, but maybe prior Puppet 5.
Hello. I found always difficult to allows different developers to work on the same Puppet master, so to provide code on the same Puppet master. Now, I tried to find a solution via an integration with the Git2Lite and hooks. So anyone else can access to the Puppet master, but there will be some support for the users or something like that for multi-developers users on the same Puppet master. So for example, we are two system admins.
Yeah.
And we want to use only one Puppet master. And I don't want that one system admin interacts with the other system admin, or in principle, I don't know, because he is not so skilled, or so on, he's in train, or something like that. So okay, I don't want to give to him the access to that Puppet masters, but I want to use only one Puppet master. So what I'm doing now is integrating with the Git2Lite, so he code his code on his laptop, then commit it inside the Git2Lite, and Git2Lite with an hook push it inside an environment defined for that user. Okay, yeah.
So you're using Git2Lite like other people might use R10K. It's the same approach, okay. Mostly. So when you update your Git repository, you want to update the Puppet master automatically without giving the user access to the Puppet master so that he fetches his new commits. So this can easily be done either. Have a look on GitHub for Puppet hooks. There are some hook scripts for Git which will do exactly what you mentioned. So you have them locally doing a Puppet parser validate, doing ERB template checking prior you do the commit, or once upon you do the commit, it's pre-commit hook. And you have a post-update hook on the Puppet master. You have to just add it to the repository. And this hook then takes care, maybe you have to configure it depending whether your Git repository is on another location as the Puppet master. So the Git server needs access to the Puppet master as a user that can update the stuff. But this is not the user, you as the system administrator, it's a functional user. You can protect it with SSH key and command only. There is no real hard integration built inside Puppet 4, yes. So this is more the workflow around Puppet itself. So working with Git and dealing with modules and updating stuff. And this is the point where Puppet says, okay, there are so many solutions around and people will continue using a certain solution, or we provide them with information how they can build up an easy solution. But if you have found the way of using that with Gitolite, have you ever taken into advance or thought about also using something like a code review tool? So something like Garrett. You can put Garrett in front of a Git repository, and if someone puts a commit, he just has to not do Git push, but Git review. So it's inside the review system. And inside the review system, you can also do automated tests and stuff like that. And when a commit has a certain vote, numbers of votes, it gets cherry-picked or merged automatically.
We have time for one more question. Okay, you win.
So you talked about hyphens, I think, in variable names. What about module names, class names, and paths to modules?
So what I always recommend to people asking me, okay, regarding namings, when it comes to classes and modules, I always tell them to not use names that are already types. It's the first thing. I always ask them to not use at least a minus sign inside. Best thing is to have them not starting with capital letters for classes, because these are normally references. Difficult to decide what is it. Is it a class or is it a reference? So normally I tell people use only non-capital words, non-capital letter words. Don't use any special signs like plus, like minus. The only thing which is allowed is underscore. And if you write wrapper modules for a shared module, and please don't give it the same name because it can exist only once. It's a directory at all. But maybe append or prepend somehow a short abbreviation that makes sure this is from our company, this is a local thing we have here. And maybe put it also even in multiple Git repositories and put it into multiple module paths on the Puppet master.
Thank you.